Paw Report on WEIU is supported by Rural King, America's farm and home store, livestock feed, farm equipment, pet supplies, and more. You can find your store and more information regarding Rural King at ruralking.com.
Dave's Decorating Center is a proud supporter of the Paw Report on WEIU. Dave's Decorating Center features the Mohawk Smart Strand Silk Forever Clean Carpet. Dave's Decorating Center, authorized Mohawk Color Center in Charleston.
We're off to the farm for this Paw Report Classic. Your traditional farm may house some cows and chickens, but at KF Acres near Decatur, sheep are the livestock of choice. The Paw Report on the road starts now. Why sheep? How did you get started in this?
I was 5 years old and my mom joined a wool spinning fiber guild in town and brought home some sheep and said, here, take care of them, and these will make a good 4-H project for you in another couple years. And it kind of went from there.
How did you, how do you learn the process? How do you learn the animal? How did you, I guess they're not intimidating when you first see them, but they are larger animals. So how did you kind of learn the trade? Trial and error. I spent a lot of time with a lot of older people watching and learning. Spent a lot of time on the road at people's houses and farms and at shows and sales, and basically always trying to learn something without necessarily asking questions was kind of my mentality and the purpose of which I did. And study the animal. Study the animal. I spent some time on a livestock judging team when I was in 4-H age. Learned about 3 or 4 different species of beef and the swine and the sheep and the goats, but primarily I focused most of my efforts on the sheep because that's what I had. I don't really know why I kind of went towards them, but I always kind of gravitated to them. I grew up on a dairy farm, and we had beef cows and we've had pigs and we've had a little bit of everything, but I can't explain why it was always being drawn to the sheep. Are sheep farms unique? I just have to say, not that I'm a city girl, but are they unique in this part of the country? I wouldn't say so. There's a lot of sheep. If you went within an hour of here, you could probably find, and we actually did a small count, and there's probably 25 or 30 sheep flocks within an hour of this place that are competitive in terms of showing and raising sheep, plus the many others that I don't know about that are just geared for wool or fiber production or meat production or whatever their individual intents are. So while I would say that they're not unique, they're the same as every other farm in terms of grass and fence and barns and livestock, that here in the Midwest and the Corn Belt region, that sheep flocks are smaller. Most of them are probably 20 to 40 head, opposed to being out west on the range where there might be 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 head. I want to know the characteristics of a sheep. Again, coming from somebody that grew up with dogs and cats, not sheep, what are these animals like? What's their tick? Uniquely, sheep they have the ability to convert a roughage inedible product for people in terms of grass and hay, and they can convert that into 3 byproducts, we'll say, in terms of meat, in terms of wool, and in terms of milk. Milk is ever growing, not a large facet of the sheep industry because you've got dairy goats and dairy cattle to provide the milk that most people need, but sheep probably make up 95+% of the fiber industry that is homegrown here in the U.S. And then the meat's ever growing too. So they're one of the rare species that can come up with three products. What's their personality like? Are they smart? Drastically different from animal to animal. Really? Some animals and even from breed to breed, but more so animal to animal. Some are extremely tame and friendly and will walk up to you out in the pen and you can sit there and pet them and rub them and scratch them and whatever else, and others see a person and want nothing to do with you. It depends on how they're upbrought. It depends on how much time you spend with them from a baby onward, but still very, very different from animal to animal.
What is their origin? I know that they travel in a group or a flock, if you would call
yep.
it. Why is it that instinct? Is it to protect themselves? I mean, from way back when, from wolves or from coyotes or whatever it might be?
For the most part, yes. Sheep are a prey animal, and they have that natural, what's called flocking instinct to them, and so, you know, if you take one sheep by itself, you got one pair of eyes to look out. If you take 100 sheep by themselves, you got 200 pairs of eyes to look out, or 100 pairs, 200 eyes looking out and looking in every direction. So they kind of flock together. You can see them when they're grazing. Rarely will a group of ewes be too many feet apart. They'll always be pretty close together.
Can you talk about the different breeds, and then once we kind of go over that, I'd like for you to explain the kind of sheep that you have here. But it's my understanding that there are more breeds of sheep than any other livestock.
I think so. I think there's 200 or 300 different breeds. Sheep are basically divided into 3 types. There's meat sheep, there's wool sheep, and there's hair sheep. And of the different wool type sheep, there's fine wools and there's medium wools and there's coarse wools. Predominantly the medium wool sheep are the meat sheep. The fine wool sheep and the coarse wool sheep are the more fiber oriented fleece type sheep. And then there's the hair sheep, which may either grow wool and shed it or just be hair sheep. Here we raise Oxfords, which are a medium wool sheep. They're a white bodied, dark faced, big frame type of an animal, kind of a dual purpose in terms of selling some wool off of them, but also being primarily geared for a meat type production. Our other breed is what we call natural colored. It's a relatively new, more so a classification than a breed. According to our associations, to be natural colored, it's 30% of the body, excluding the face and legs, has to be some color other than white. Okay, and the natural colored sheep are a fleece breed, so we do put a lot of emphasis in our genetic selection on fleeces. Some are fine wool, some are medium wool. We don't have any coarse wooled sheep, which are kind of a curly wool sheep. Their wool actually kind of grows in locks. We don't have any of those, but they're out there too.
And you said you have Oxford sheep here. What is the characteristic? You said they're big.
Oxfords are big sheep. They're meaty sheep. They're white bodied, dark faced. More so meat oriented. Our natural colored sheep they're predominantly Columbia blood. They have some Cordale in them, they have some Dorset in them, they have some Rambouillet in them, which are also all big wool sheep. But again, kind of similarly built. All sheep that we pick are kind of big framed, heavy muscled, growthy type of sheep because of the show ring is our primary emphasis goal. But the natural colors are a little more fleece oriented than the Oxfords. The Oxfords we don't use fleece at all for any genetic selection.
You know, I suppose, and this is just my ignorance, not growing up around sheep, that I thought that they were all white, but that's not necessarily the case. They grow other colors, or if that's the right term. They're not just all white sheep.
That's right. There's a lot of color variation between breeds. Some breeds are red, like a Tunis. They have red faces, red feet. Some breeds are black, like our natural colored sheep, or they may be spotted, like a chocolate chip cookie pattern. Some breeds are what they call Morit, which is kind of a brown and white color. There's brown ones, and there's a lot of different color variations. And the different color variations typically appeal to 2 types of people: the show ring type of people that like that color for lots of flash and eye appeal and to really stand out in the ring, but it also appeals to the fleece people in terms of having some really good color palettes to choose from to make that yarn without having to dye and blend and do a bunch of other things to the fleece.
Take me around the day in the life of your farm here, of KF Acres.
Through most of the year, it's pretty easy and simple. Do chores in the morning, maybe have some odds and end projects to do and go to work or something. And in the weekends, we'll spend time deworming sheep or trimming feed or whatever we need to do and catch up on the weekends. The bulk of our time in our lives is spent with the sheep in lambing season in January. And that may mean waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go out and put 2 or 3 hours in before we got to leave to go to work. Get home that night, head straight to the barn to take care of a bottle lamb or make sure that there's no babies being born or something that needs to get nursed. And we might be out in the barn until 10 or 11 at night that night. And then one of us will wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go out and check on bottle lambs or check on ewes, make sure nobody's having lambs. And so during lambing season in particular, sleep is pretty limited around here. We try to rotate as much as we can because after a while you kind of get tired and ready for some rest. But average day, chores in the morning, do kind of go to work and come home that night and do chores again. It's pretty simple most of the year. Raising sheep is not that complicated as long as they got feed and water and shelter and kind of somebody to watch over them. They're going to thrive.
And also after lambing season, there's also when you have to shear them. Is that a once a year, twice a year? When do you shear your sheep?
The bulk of our sheep will shear in December, right before lambing season, because our goal is to take the wool off of them to better increase lamb survivability. If a ewe has a big 6-inch long bulky fleece on her, she's not going to feel that baby lamb. She may lay on it, she may smash it. The other thing is she's not going to feel the weather elements, so she may lay down in a snowdrift and have a baby lamb in January or February, and the chances of that lamb surviving are probably not very good. So by shearing the ewes, they're actually exposed to the weather, and therefore whenever it's time to have a lamb, they spend most of their time in the barn. The lambs are born in a barn, and they're off and running to a good start. The other thing is, from a fiber production standpoint, having lambs and going through that process of life is extremely stressful, and it'll actually cause what's called a wool break, which is a brittle spot in the fleece. So if you shear your sheep right before lambing, you don't have the wool break, as opposed to you shear your sheep like 6 months before they're lambing, then your fleece, you're actually causing a weak spot halfway in the middle of your fleece growing cycle.
How long does it take to shear them? And then once you shear them, what happens next?
Professionally, sheep shearers may fly through a sheep a minute, 2 sheep every minute. People shear. I got friends that tell me they shear 300 or 400 a day. I shear my own. It might take 5 minutes to do them. The other thing is these sheep are considerably bigger than a lot of your range type sheep, which are smaller. So obviously, if they're bigger, they take more time. I don't get in a hurry. I take my time and try to make the wool as good of a clean cut as I can. And so it might take 5 minutes, it might take 10 minutes, just depends on how big the ewe is and how big of a hurry I'm in. If it's a ram, it might take me longer because they're bigger and more stubborn.
Are they bothered by that process?
No, most of the time when we shear sheep on a real scale, you flip them over and you'll sit them on their butt, and there's an actual technique to shear them, and they just basically sit there. They don't move, they don't kick, they don't jump. It doesn't hurt them. It's no different than me going and sitting in a barber's chair and getting my hair cut. I'm there for a reason, and a lot of times the sheep know whenever it starts getting hot and they're ready. In most operations, it's spring shear or summer shear. The sheep know, and they're ready to get it off of them. And most of the time they just sit there and when they're done, they get up and move on about their life.
But I heard don't turn them over because they can't get up. If they're laying on their back, that's a bad thing.
Some may be that way.
You have a little story about that.
And that's kind of how they are. There'll be times when I'll be shearing a sheep and I'll think, man, this sheep hasn't moved in a while, and I'll look at it and maybe I'll look its eye or flip its ear or something, and it'll blink its eye, and I'll think, oof, good, it's still alive. I kind of worried. Because they really just sit there and don't move, and it's like a spa and a massage maybe to them. I don't know, but they just sit there.
Huh. Let's talk about the wool. That's an interesting process, and you said that you've been doing some research on wool and wool products and dyeing. What have you discovered in your research over the years of once you shear the sheep and it's bagged and it's sent off to wherever it may go?
It's an ever-growing industry. There's lots and lots of more people trying to make their own fibers and yarns and creations from artwork even. Really gaining a lot of ground. I never envisioned it prior to about a year and a half ago of how much of a demand there was for fiber. This past winter we sold 25 or 30 fleeces. We advertised them on Facebook and we shipped them out probably to 15 different states in boxes, and the people bought a whole fleece or half a fleece raw right off the sheep. And you go through the time and we skirt it, which is to remove the non-desirable fibers and fleeces and the dirty wools and the heavy grease wools, and then we ship a nice, clean, good product to somebody that wants to do something with it. And then once they get it, you know, each person that I sell wool to, I ask, what are you going to make with this? And it's interesting, you know, some will make yarns and some will make gloves and socks and artwork, and it's really interesting to me the different versatility that wool has for people. You know, historically speaking, a lot of sheep were white fleeced, and they want white fleeces not just for white yarns, but for dyeing and coloring too. And the really interesting thing to me is a lot of these natural colored sheep, these gray sheep and these silver ones, these spotted ones in particular, they hold dye and so much better and make much more vibrant colors than the white does. And it's easier to dye them to get those colors. And it's been really an eye-opener for me in the demand of it, just the sheer demand of fiber and fleece.
When you talk about the fleece, when you show them, and you do a lot of that, you spend about every weekend going and to different shows. I guess take me through that process. You know, what does a judge look for in a contestant in a show like this? If it's a ewe, or if it's a steer, or if it's a lamb, is it the coat? Is it the color? Is it the body build? Is it the face? You know, I think of dogs, you know, when they're in the show ring, but I'm sure it's a little different when it comes to sheep. So take me through that process.
Each breed has what's called a scorecard or a standards of excellence, and so they'll take, depending on the breed, they'll assert a certain percentage of a points based out of 100 as to whether they feel that body conformation is more important than fleece. Most of the meat breed sheep are judged strictly on body conformation. The more structurally correct, the heavier muscled, the bigger framed, whatever is important in a body conformation is what picks the best sheep to win, whether that's in a show or a sale, and that's what the buyers are going to choose if we do go to a sale. In the wool sheep, they'll put emphasis on the fleeces. Some breeds might put emphasis 50% on fleeces, 50% on body conformation. Other breeds might put emphasis 25 or 30% on fleece and 75 or 70% on body conformation. So it just depends on your breed, depends on your goal. If you're going to a show or a sale, you might trim that sheep a little bit different, and by trimming them, you know, we put them up on a trimming stand or a blocking stand, something to that effect, and we shape the wool on the body to make that sheep look like a perfect specimen. So the fleece is actually going to be different lengths. It may be shorter on the front shoulder, and it may be longer on the butt of the sheep, just because we're trying to make that sheep look perfect. And by perfect, you know, it's just like a dog show or a beauty pageant. This is nothing more than that. We're taking something from the pasture that just looks like a sheep, and we're trying to turn. We might wash it, make it snow white, and take it in if it's that type of a breed.
That's what I was going to ask. Is I know you have a lot of head of sheep here. Do you bathe them? I mean, how do you take care of the wool to make sure it's just pristine?
We do. Our Oxfords are a clean breed of sheep. They're a meat sheep, so wool is irrelevant in the show ring. So they will get washed before we take them to a show or to a sale. We'll put them up. There's a couple different ways. One is to put them on a stand and wash them with a hose and Dawn soap. The other one, if we've got a bunch of them, will be to put them in tanks and wash them. And so they're washed before they take, and when we take those into the ring, they're going to be white, not bleached white, but they're going to be extremely snow white. We haul a lot of sheep for a lot of other people. We trim a lot of sheep for a lot of other people, and the bulk of those are also washed sheep. we get paid very well to do that for other people, and sometimes the people will wash them themselves and sometimes we'll wash them. But in almost every case, the sheep will arrive here and we'll do all the cutout work and the trimming work and the actual preparation for the show or the sale. And then we'll even haul that animal to that show and that sale for people and to show them and sell them. And basically the producer and the owner of the sheep doesn't ever have to leave home. And any more online sales and online viewing of public auctions is more and more popular. So our people are sending me a text message as we're standing in the ring, hey, you know, fix the back legs, or the sheep looks good. And that's kind of fun too, that they can sit at home and do that and trust us with their animal, and it's kind of enjoying for us that people actually do trust us. So,
you know, just like dogs and cats, they make good pets. What about sheep?
It just depends. Sheep obviously take a lot of space. They take some grass, they take some feed. They're going to be a little more high maintenance because you've got to shear them at least once a year. They're prone to some diseases or some problems, or depending on the weather, that type of thing. If you want to raise them, you got to lamb them out, you got to breed them, you got to vaccinate them, you got to keep them healthy. In terms of a person that likes livestock and wants to add sheep to their operation, yeah, they'll probably make a great pet. They're definitely smaller and more docile than a horse or a cow. Definitely cleaner and easier to look at and more appealing to be around than a pig or anything to that effect. They're certainly easier to keep in a pen than a goat. So from that avenue, they're pretty advantageous.
As we, we've got a couple minutes left here in our talk today. I want to know a funny story that you might have about lambing or shearing or maybe your first sheep. What's the most memorable story that you can think of in all of your years doing this that you've had with these animals?
Oh, I don't know. There's so many stories. I don't know if we can come up with a most memorable. Probably one that would stick out, particularly if you asked my parents, is the very first time I showed one. And I didn't want to go out there. You know, I was 8 and I was in 4-H and I was scared, and they basically said push, and they pushed me out and said don't let go or everybody's gonna laugh at you. And it all kind of started from there, you know. The other kind of memorable story is when I met my wife, and I had called her. She was a sheep superintendent at a county fair, and I had called her and wanted to know about coming to the fair to show, and didn't know anything at the time, and I wasn't actually going to go to it, and she practically called me and begged me and wanted me to come because her other people backed out, and look where that ended up and got us today.
On this beautiful farm.
Yeah.
On this beautiful farm.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but we're trying to make it look good.
Absolutely. Well, Jody, thank you so much for inviting the Paw Report to come out and see your beautiful animals, and for spending some time with us on this great day and talking about some great animals.
Oh,
so
we
much.
appreciate coming out. It means a lot to us, you know, and in both of our jobs, we try to educate the public as much as we can. So hopefully you learned something.
I did. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for going on the road with us here on the Paw Report. We'll see you next time. If you're a veterinarian, trainer, groomer, specialist, rescue organization, or shelter that would like to partner with the Paw Report by providing expert guests for the show, please contact us by emailing weiu@weiu.net or call 217-581-5956. If you have a topic you'd like to see on the show or questions for our experts, contact us with those too.
Dave's Decorating Center is a proud supporter of the Paw Report on WEIU. Dave's Decorating Center features the Mohawk Smart Strand Silk Forever Clean Carpet. Dave's Decorating Center, authorized Mohawk Color Center in Charleston.
The Paw Report on WEIU is supported by Rural King, America's farm and home store, livestock feed, farm equipment, pet supplies, and more. You can find your store and more information regarding Rural King at ruralking.com. Additional support for the Paw Report provided from Soggy Paws of Mattoon.